Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 775, the Bahrain Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I needed you to do. Tonight, we're going to review the first race of the 2022 season, the Bahrain Grand Prix. In order to do that, of course, I have to introduce my guest tonight.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Nice, Paul. Is that a 1/18 scale Heart of Racing Aston Martin from the INSA series?
No, it's actually a different scale. It's actually a Scalextrics.
Oh, nice.
So it's a little, slot car. Just came
Very
out. So
nice.
that was nice, yeah. It also not moving at this moment.
So Paul, if you guys haven't been following Paul, and then the number 23 and 27 Heart of Racing team in IMSA, the Sebring 12 was this weekend, and Paul had a bit of his own Red Bull weekend, didn't you?
Yeah. It was a lot of a Red Bull weekend. It was a tough race for us, unfortunately. Both cars.
But in true F1 fashion, you just told the press that it was some sort of hydraulic issue.
Yes, that someone else from another manufacturer gave to us.
Yes. It was a standard part. Damn it.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, it was a tough weekend. Obviously, we were down pretty early with both cars with technical issues. Kept pushing, to finish the race, and got one to the finish and one nearly to the finish, but another technical issue came up near the end, so we had to pull the 23 car off completely. But nothing more demoralizing than that. And then just seeing the crew, when you're chasing a little electrical gremlin, there's so many things that you're looking for. So you're taking this off, then you put it back on again. Nope, that's not it. And the crew just were relentless and just kept going and going. I think it looked like 2.5 hours to try and find the fix for it. And you can just imagine, that beats you. they were beaten up pretty hard, So hopefully we can repay all their hard work with some more success in the upcoming races.
Yeah, no doubt. It's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Just brutal. Well, in between all of that, I know you managed to get the Bahrain Grand Prix watched.
I did.
Shockingly. And, Paul, I'm sitting here looking at my camera image. I was having some interweb problems down here. Sorry, this all looks like a mess now. It's terrible looking. But
yeah, that's where's the wiring? Who's the wiring?
I know. I had some interweb problems, and I was having to pull a bunch of stuff out. And it looks terrible. So apologies to viewers. So Paul, we're going to talk about. I hope so. I really do hope so. It's the last thing I want to come on here and present this kind of just disheveled look for you guys.
Right.
Terrible. It's just very. It's just not a version of me I recognize.
The fans have standards.
Yes, they do, and they should. Well. Do they? Yeah, they do. So, Paul, Bahrain, first race of the season, came out of testing. Nobody really knew what was going to go on and who was quick. The hints and innuendos would have it that perhaps Red Bull was the team to beat and Ferrari might be on pace. And also, you had Mercedes backpedaling and trying desperately to reset expectations, saying that, no, we're going to be struggling. We're struggling. And everybody's like, yeah, right. Sandbagging. And they're like, no, we're not. We are struggling. Yeah, right. We saw this before. That's exactly how this played out. Red Bull very fast. Charles Leclerc and Ferrari absolutely on it. Charles Leclerc converting his pole position into a victory. Incredible return to form by Ferrari with a Ferrari 1-2. Certainly, pole position for Ferrari was a big shot across the bow. But heading into the race, I wasn't quite sure at the time, Paul. Okay, so I thought, look, one lap, Charles Leclerc looked good. Red Bull is thereabouts with Max. And second, I was thinking, okay, so maybe that single lap pace, they're there. And having been a long-suffering Ferrari fan, everyone knows I'm a Ferrari fan, I'm thinking, okay, but their long-run race pace may not be there, right? And as it turns out, was I wrong, Paul?
Yeah, yeah. It seems literally testing meant everything. As much
Yeah,
as we say testing means nothing, it really
with
from the
Haas,
the Haas car had some
yeah,
great laps in testing, and obviously, McLaren showed decent testing in Barcelona, but obviously was struggling in Bahrain, and they struggled even worse
yeah.
over the race weekend. So yeah, I think basically, if you'd have looked at testing and gone through everything, I think pretty much that's how this race played out in the end.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Well, let's talk about the race. So we'll start off with Ferrari, Charles Leclerc in P1, Carlos Sainz in P2. Charles converted his pole into the victory, but it wasn't all smooth sailing as Verstappen nearly undercut him on the first stops. And there were some very nice back and forth from both drivers. This led to many to suggest that the regulation changes worked, a treat, but I'm not entirely sure where and how. It's going to take a little time to figure that out. But because there was still DRS at play, right? And it was playing a role for sure. And they both kept attacking each other. But what may have actually did work is that the cars did seem they could follow each other a little closer without all that overheating and all the dirty air and loss of aero and all that kind of stuff. That did seem to play out. It was interesting. In the end, Charles fought for his position despite the DNF from both the Red Bulls, and he managed to stay ahead on the safety car restart. Although, to be fair, Max was already struggling with his issues, making it, so he was a little off the boil even at the restart after the safety car. But what was interesting, and then I was watching that battle between both of them, Paul, and it was really fun to watch them both go at each other hammer and tongs. But then after the race, I was watching. I had to go back and look at all the passes again because Charles said, well, what he was doing, he was braking really early into turn one, letting Max go in there so he could tag the DRS line on the exit and get him in four. And he did that 3 times, and it worked a treat.
Yeah. You got to have confidence to do that, though. You got to have confidence in your car and all that. And obviously, I think the Red Bull was just a tick behind, and Max was trying to force, that little bit, which sometimes does work out for sure. But I think Charles had the confidence in his car to let everything play out and use the DRS to his favor and allow the pass to happen, and confident that he's going to get back by. I mean, obviously we detest DRS down to its very core. But if we're going to have DRS, let's just have it on every straight. So maybe it balances out in the end.
Yeah.
At least there was a little trickery and a little chance to catch up, to re-attack, which honestly, when DRS, first came out, it didn't allow that to happen. Usually where it positioned, and only one single DRS zone basically just kind of struck off any chance of a repass. But if you got like 5 DRS zones on the track, and I think this one had 3 or something,
3,
maybe it balances out eventually. Perhaps I'd still obviously rather not have it there at all, but if we are going to have it, let's have more of them rather than less of them, I suppose. I don't know. But the cars definitely seem to be significantly allowed to run significantly closer and allow people to pounce on the cars ahead, even in non-DRS zones. We saw at some points coming through the downward chicane, etc. So, so that was a positive. But as you said, it's only one race. All the different tracks, the different makeups of the tracks, different configurations. There's going to be some ebb and flow there. How great that stuff is going to play.
Yeah, I was wondering, Paul, I was watching the first attempt, second attempt, and I thought, man, I wonder if the third attempt, if Max will let him keep turn 1 and then try the pass on 4, at 4.
Yeah.
But didn't seem to do that.
No, he just threw it in there. He sent that last one for sure, and that pretty much scuppered any other re-attack at that point because he just overshot it. So
exactly. So great race from Charles. He looked in total command, very confident of the car. Everything looked great. From Carlos's side, Paul, he was a little down on himself, after the race and talking. He struggled all weekend. And while he seemed to struggle more than Charles did, I think it's because I think there's part of it. He's just so down, but I think that's just part of Carlos because I think he considered himself the faster of the two,
Yeah.
and he was frustrated that he finished second. And you know, he inherited P2 and Max DNF'd, but he held off Sergio for most of the race, took advantage of the Red Bull DNF to claim second. Not a bad drive at all, nothing to be ashamed of. But he did say that it was one of the harder races he's had since joining the team, if you can believe that, because he didn't feel at home in the car all weekend long.
Yeah.
And so that was, yeah, tough. I don't know. It's, you know, you come away in P2 pretty much on the tail of Charles, and to hear Carlos go, yeah, it was crap. I was crap all weekend. I didn't feel home in the car. And you're thinking, you're P2.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting his thought process, or how he told the whole world what was going on. Really,
Yeah.
it was in his head, and he said he was thinking about the driving rather than just driving and it being a fluid motion. I mean, think about, sometimes if you ever like thought about breathing and then you start thinking about breathing, it's
Yeah.
not or walking even,
Or blinking,
one
yeah.
step, two step. Yeah. When you start overthinking things, they become awkward. And I maybe there's just not something in the car that's giving them the good feedback. So I would say that's probably something that the team maybe can help him with, to get that feedback. Because if you have all the little nerves out there getting the right information, then that does help in building that smoothness, that fluidity, and the subconscious driving, which ultimately you need to get to be at the height of the car's potential.
Yeah. It's a big win for Ferrari. Leaves many wondering if they actually do have the race pace to stay ahead of Red Bull this season. Regardless of that question, they are starting the season off right, and it does seem they can run with the Bulls. And, while it could be, to kind of your point, could be, track to track, it's going to be difficult to know if Mercedes irons out their issues. We legit could have a three-way battle for the constructors title here.
Yeah, no, I believe we do. I mean, because we saw how good the Ferrari was in Barcelona as well, right? So that's two tracks to compare to. We talked about it last time. They found themselves in a great position, and I think some of it was planned, to develop their car last year for this year and really get a step ahead of maybe the two teams that were fighting out for the championship. They were fighting with McLaren a little bit. But as I said, they third or fourth doesn't mean anything to Ferrari. Just winning means to Ferrari. So they weren't going to throw all their eggs in one basket just to beat McLaren by one spot in the championship. Right. They already had that plan from the beginning of 2021. And, we saw, the team boss not at all the races last year. That was all a part of staying in control and keeping the team focused on their big opportunity to take a step up and get them fighting with the Red Bull and the Mercedes team. And by George, they did it.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, because I think there were two elements that Ferrari were heavily focused on in 2021 last year. Not only did they have to redesign a complete new car, new regulations, new tires, wheel sizes, everything. Not only do you have to hit that out of the park and get it right, but they also had to continue to develop and pick up more gain from that engine. Where they had that 2019, the FI were like, time out on that. And then they fell back 2020, and then 21, they gained a little bit. And they really had to come out of the box with a very powerful engine. And Paul, I would say that perhaps evidenced by their customer cars, they may have an engine that is right there with everyone else.
Yeah, you look at the results and you see the Alfa Romeos and you see the Haas car right up there duking it. It sounds like it's been a significant step. Surprisingly, though, counter of that, you look at the Mercedes engine cars, pretty close to the back, struggling.
Right.
So,
right.
I don't know how they lost so much, or did the others just gain? I'm not sure, but you see McLaren at the back, you see the Williams team at the back, and Mercedes not quite there with the front runners. So, something they definitely need to look deep into it, because it's definitely engine related as well as just chassis and design development of each of the team's cars.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton P3, George Russell in P4. The team entered the race saying they were focused on damage limitation, knowing their car was down on pace, and that was clear as they were over 30 seconds off the leaders by the midpoint of the race. They they're running the car a little higher to get rid of that bouncing, and ultimately they think that's costing them a second a lap. Lewis and George tried the hard compound, which was a move, let's be honest, in the wrong direction. And that cost them a lot of that time, leaving them 30 seconds behind. But when they did change back to those mediums, they fared a little better on pace, despite being what Toto said, very overwinged and very draggy. He also said, when asked about the Mercedes, saying, you had all the other Mercedes customers at the back. They said, is there an engine? And he says, well, yeah, I mean, we were overwinged. We were very draggy. We need to tune the engine. That engine's won us 8 titles. So we just need to tune a little better and blah, blah, blah. Fine. I'm not disagreeing with, he would know better than anyone, but I think there's a little bit of just kind of, comment to the press. Mercedes, I don't think, entered this year with just last year's engine. I think they worked on it for sure. But whatever it is that they may have tried, I think this is a global issue for that power unit. And it's if you're a Mercedes fan, it's a little shocking because they've had this baked in advantage for 8 years, right? With a far superior engine. So they struggled a little bit first part of the last season, but then came on song in the last part. So it will be interesting to see what they do. Lewis, on those hard compounds, and put George on those hard compounds. Very difficult from Lewis's standpoint. Before we get to George, Lewis, once he got back on those mediums, Paul, he started, this is where you could see the Lewis factor, because he did start to claw back some time, did start to get, back up through the field, making some passes and trying to get rid of that 30 seconds. But it wasn't until the safety car came back, eliminated that delta, that 30-second delta that they had to the leaders. Certainly that benefited them, because they could have been mired back midfield on other cars that were on fresh tires. It's hard to know if he would have got a podium position at that point. Difficult to know. And as I tweeted, and I got body slammed by every Mercedes Lewis Hamilton, I said, wait a minute, did Mercedes just benefit from a safety car?
Let's just not go there.
Oh, I can't even bring it up. Oh my God, it's a joke. It's a joke. So, but having said that, Lewis is pretty magnanimous about it. He said, look, yeah, I mean, I feel bad for Red Bull, but, you got to, and as we've said all the time, you got to be there to take advantage of this, right? Yep. And so Lewis was there. I thought, given all the troubles that car's having and he's having, thought he's pretty magnanimous coming out in the press, and he's just saying, hey, I got a lot of work to do, and congratulations for Ferrari. I thought it was a good call.
Yeah. The hard tire call was interesting, and we saw the troubles he had coming out of the pit lane. The tire temps or tire blanket temperatures are lowered nowadays, so getting hard tires switched on is going to be a little harder depending on the weather and where you are, and the track surface, etc. So we saw some of that. I wonder why they did that, but you got to also remember, this is the first race of the season. They're trying to find out how the new rules with the new tire, etc. They didn't have a lot to lose by throwing on the hards and seeing what happened.
Well, I will say this, Paul. When I watched the post-race interview with Lewis, he said that they had a lot of degradation and very little rear end grip downforce.
Yeah,
and maybe that. I mean, if you're
interesting
Bono,
for a car that was overwinged.
Well, that's my point, which is an interesting comment, because Toto said they were overwinged and draggy. Right.
So it's usually one or the other, right?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, they've still got a lot, and it probably does have to do with the amount of height they've got and the under tray working, etc. I mean, if you're lifting the car up in the air, you're losing some of that grip, right? That downforce. Even though it's bouncing the car out, so it's not porpoising and it's drivable, you're still canceling out points.
And you
of
don't have that grip.
downforce. Right. So
Yeah.
so you could see that happening. And I think, they got rid of those hards pretty quick too. I don't know if they got
Well,
rid
they
of them
did for Lewis, but they kept George on him
Oh,
for
did
quite
they?
a
Okay.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't following that, how he was doing. So
Yeah.
yeah, they seemed to get rid of him pretty quick for him. So I didn't know if it was because the tire, like sometimes you can abuse a hard tire because it's skating across the surface rather than something that's actually gaining some grip, because you're fighting the lack of grip the whole time, and all these things can add to actually destroying a hard tire. Sorry, a hard tire quicker than you can a soft tire if the grip level is in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Yeah, George had a good start, jumped from 9th to 6th, tucked in behind Lewis, but the two were on different strategies as George was left out a lot longer on the ill-performing hards. And at the time, I thought, you clearly know the hards are not good. Get him off of them. You got Lewis off of him. Get George off of him. But they said, well, they were on different strategy. And I was like, oh, it's just, not a good strategy. Well, already you're
He's
getting
on a good
bonus.
one. He's on the bad strategy.
Yeah, you're on the bonus strategy all of a sudden.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. So, okay. Note to George, you're already on the bonus strategy there. They left you out on hard compounds when everyone, including the commentators, knew that was a bad idea.
Oh, dear.
Not good. But anyway, Lewis initially did a good job staying in touch with Sergio. It wasn't until he was put on the hard compounds they started to lose serious time. Once the medium started, he started clawing back time. The car had little interest in meeting a podium finish. The late safety car was good. The dual DNF from Red Bulls gifted the podium, gifted George, his position in P4. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to measure George.
It is.
Out of this.
In this race, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's hard to measure either of them, really. I just think they were chasing that car so much, Paul. It would be hard for me to render any sort of review of George's driving. I think he was thereabouts.
Yeah, he was. He was. As I said, they weren't really attacked from behind, so it was nearly like a point scoring test session for them. So I think, I'm sure there was a lot of to and fro on from driver to pit and how the car was performing, et cetera, because they do definitely need, obviously, to claw back some time, and they're not going to get a lot of time to do that. So they got to make the most of the time on track as they can.
Yeah, well, look, if you're a Lewis fan or a Mercedes fan, the Red Bull leaving with no points. Lewis has got a 15-point lead over Max in the championship, right?
Yeah, there you go.
And as last year taught us, every single point counts. Every single half point counts, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, this is great for Mercedes to walk away with a podium, a 3-4, Lewis 15 points ahead. So no, it's a great result for sure. Let's talk about your favorite and mine, Haas F1, Mick Schumacher P11. Kevin Magnussen, P5. Magnussen parachuted back into this team. What a year and a bunch of money from your Crawley make, Paul. The team. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh,
Thanks, Nicky.
Sorry, we changed that number. You were trying to call me?
Sorry about that. Yeah. Thanks, suckers. So the team qualified well, and in the hands of Kevin Magnussen, they delivered a P5. Kevin jumped up to 5th on the first lap, had a lockup, lost the spot to Perez, but then he battled all race long to protect that 7th place until both Red Bulls DNF'd. That gifted him a P5. He would have been in P7 on merit, Paul. And you have to be there to take advantage of the failures. Kevin was on pace, and it was a great return. He was elated. I mean, he was just ear-to-ear grin. Couldn't believe how much change had happened at the team. But look, he had to deliver, and he did. I mean, what a difference just having Kevin in that car versus Nikita, right?
Yeah, it's going to be great for Mick Schumacher too, honestly, as a massive benchmark. He's going to have a lot of experience, a lot of speed on the other side of the garage. And I think he's going to benefit wholeheartedly from it. But I mean, I saw Kevin drive a lot last year, right, in IMSA. He's a fighter, man, and he gets on it and he just loves to drive as fast as he can, and just to get the chance to see him back in Formula One, I think he's relishing that, and Haas are benefiting from it as well. Obviously, I mean, it was a great drive. I mean, he's done great from lap one that he jumped back in the F1 car at the last minute. I mean, he deserves to be there. It was a shame he had to leave, and let's hope this means they can find a way of keeping him in that seat for more than a year or whatever that their plan is.
Right. What was the other drivers in the IMSA paddocks view of Kevin? Were they pretty impressed with him?
Yeah, no, everyone's impressed, and he's a hard driver, but he's not a stupid driver. I mean, when you drive in multi-class series, there's certain drivers that when they're driving the DP cars around you, they're more likely to shove you off than do anything else. But Kevin was always a hard driver, but a fair driver. So, I mean, we just saw in some of the practices, he could jump in a car and scoot around. It was funny, though, because when we were at Daytona, I sent you pictures of Gunther and Kevin, just hanging out day after day. Basically, I was passing them on the golf carts and things. Like, that's interesting. It does make you question whether this plan was being created a little sooner than the all of a sudden decision that we saw coming. But definitely, Kevin and Gunther are good pals. So I certainly wasn't surprised that he was the one that they called up.
Yeah, for sure. And a little different than his dad, Jan, his driving style.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Who Jan's a handy driver himself.
Oh yeah, for sure. But Kevin, he's a gritty driver, and he's the old school, grab a car by the scruff of the neck and just
which is kind of like Max in a way.
Yeah.
Max, very similar in that. Let's talk about Mick real quick. Let's see, where am I? Mick had a spin at the start after being punted by Ocon, and that put him at the back several places, which he had to engage in a recovery drive from there. He said the car didn't feel that great after that. They chose to keep Mick out on older tires during the safety car, really kind of saying, hey, look, let's roll the dice and go for track position. Kind of the only shot we got here. And, honestly, it nearly worked. He was pit for 10th place by Yuki, Fernando, and Zoe. So he didn't make it in the points, but he was close. Still, what a difference getting Kevin has made in that first race, in the car with that Ferrari power. Looks good. And it looks good, really, I would say, on balance, as long as they can find, I kind of cheekily tweeted to the team and I said, I've got a really crazy idea. Why don't you parlay this success in finding a new title sponsor? Because they're going to need it to develop, but all the earmarks would suggest that they're heading for a good season. They just got to get that sponsorship and money to keep the development going.
Right. I mean, as we know, last year, I think that was their plan, right? They didn't spend any money. They only spent the money getting themselves there was no development at all. And they were really focusing on this year's car. And just like Ferrari, they went in the right direction. And they've really improved their lot in life, basically. So, I mean, I guess they needed more title sponsor. Obviously, with the cap, maybe that helps Gene Haas make it more affordable for him, but it's always beneficial to have more money on board to develop those things. For sure. Mick Steele, that spin was a good, nice spin though. He got going, didn't lose too many places, so that was pretty cool. I don't know about leaving him out on older tires. Track position really with DRS and everything really wasn't going to work out. I'd have rather seen them come in for softs and just see what the hell he could do, because I think that would have been a benefit. But I get throwing that out there, but I don't think it really had a shot at it.
Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, P6, Zhou Guanyu, P10. Bottas qualified very well, as he usually does, or can, but he dropped back. He said he had massive wheel spin and cooked the tires and then was a sitting duck for that first lap. So he had a bad start. This left a lot of work to do, and he did it. In fact, we're looking for examples of how the new regulation cars might be working. I would say Valtteri's race may be the bellwether, because we've seen many times in a Mercedes where he couldn't get back through the field very quickly. And in this case, he couldn't get back to the field with any alacrity anyway. But in this case, in the Alpha, he did, and he got back up to what, P6-7 would have been P8, inherited
without
P6,
the DNFs,
right?
yeah.
Yep. So it was a good return. He finished basically where he qualified.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, strong car, strong drive. Strong qualifying. Shame, he was just holding on for dear life. He got a lot of wheel spin. He had the wiggle going, and then everyone's just kind of, cutting across his bow and making it worse after worse. So he just fell down like a stone. But the recovery drive was impressive. That car seemed to have a lot of grip coming off the corners, a lot of power down grip that he could sustain, which ended up helping Zhu to make some passes too. So it wasn't all about straight line speed. It was really just they could come off the corners significantly better than some of their other midfielders, and that really helped him out a lot. So Valtteri made the most of that for sure, and he must be elated that he's still in the points, even though he's in a car that really didn't see the points too much last year, and I'm sure the team are excited about that also.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, well, it was a dual points finish.
Right.
Zhou Guanyu, first Grand Prix rookie, first Grand Prix for him. The Chinese driver came in. A lot of question marks. It's never easy being a rookie. Look at Yuki last year, right? It can be difficult. But like Yuki, he comes in and scores points in his very first race in Bahrain. And I gotta say, I was watching him. It was kind of funny over the post race. He was completely emotionless, and he said, "I have no words." So he was
I didn't
really.
see that interview.
It was great. Yeah, it was great. Good on him. I'm very happy for him because I was watching him. He didn't do anything stupid. His passes look clean, well executed. I just thought he had a great drive all the way up to 10. Sure,
he really did. He had a good,
mature
drive. Yeah, I don't. From what I've seen, he seems like a reasonably nice guy too, which is nice, right?
Yeah.
I didn't see anything you could fault him for, really. I mean, he scored points. He didn't do any bonehead moves. I mean, when we saw Yuki come in, I mean, you didn't know what was to expect from one corner to the next, quite honestly.
Right.
Hopefully he's calmed that down a little bit, but to come in for your first F1 race and drive that calmly and not get pressed when Lewis Hamilton's bearing down on you, and just kind of get on with the program and get in the points and finish and don't make any big mistakes. I'd say that was a very impressive debut by him.
Yeah, they interviewed him on the grid before the race. Maybe Simon I think it was Martin. He said, "Yeah, we hadn't met." I'm Martin Brundle. He asked him, he said, "Look, it's just a learning for me. I've got to learn, and this is going to be a great opportunity for learn." So I think he did a great job, and good on him.
Yeah, speaking of TV feed, that's changed this year on F1 TV. So now we don't get the Sky feed. So now they've got their own commentary team, which is Joylan and some other guy. And so, because that's the only way I watched it in replay and everything. So I didn't get to see the ESPN feed or anything like that. But now they actually have their own. F1 TV has their own commentary team finally. But there wasn't anyone in the pits or anything like that. Maybe there was, but in pre-race, I don't know, with Will, etc. But basically, what I was able to see of the race from beginning to end on the F1 TV replay was just those two guys talking in the booth, and then that was the end of the race. And
wow.
So you got me all excited about the new teams there and everything, but I didn't get to see any of the new people.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Sky had a new person, Naomi or something like that. I think she had drove in Formula W or something. I don't know. It's always difficult. Not picking on anyone, but because you've driven a car doesn't necessarily make you a great broadcaster.
Right.
And I'm looking at you, Damon Hill. And I know, I like Damon.
Damon, man, I tell you.
I like Damon. We share a birthday with Sterling Moss, and I like Damon. I liked his book and all that. But man, sometimes, dude, and Naomi just, she's, I don't know. There's a lot of 30,000 foot questions. Yeah, and it's kind of like you have a choice. you could have a person that drove some cars come in and ask, well, you must be really happy, kind of questions. Or you could have somebody like Ant Davidson or Paul DeResta or Rachel or somebody in there that's asking actual really, interesting questions that are insightful.
Pieces. Yeah, I mean, it's Formula One. It's the pinnacle of motorsport. They need the pinnacle of motorsport commentary, as far as I'm concerned. And sometimes they get a little bit lost there.
Yeah, and so you got Simon out there. You've got Martin Brundle and Naomi, and bless her heart, I'm sure she's a delightful person. But I'm kind of like, you've got Martin, who is epic at what he does and has such granular knowledge of the sport. He picked the fly poop out of the pepper on this thing. And then you have this person who's brand new, and it's kind of like, and they put her in the awkward position where it makes it difficult to be commentating. I feel like she'd be better off with the millennial cast over at F1 TV,
right?
With Sam Collins and team, where they're all kind of in the same sort of boat. But get the in depth. I don't know. Anyway, I'm on a rant. Don't get me started. All right. Let's talk about Alpine. Fernando Alonso, P9, Esteban Ocon, P7. Ocon got a 5-second penalty for punting Schumacher in the first lap. He did manage to stave off the penalty with a spirited drive back into the points, and he looked to have the pace over his veteran teammate Fernando, who struggled with his car. But they did let Ocon by Fernando, so they could soak up some of that penalty, and that worked out. So he got back up to P7. Esteban said he felt bad. He said that was my fault with Mick, and I went and apologized. He goes, I felt really bad about that. But anyway, he came back to P7 for Esteban, so not too bad, but he inherited 2 places.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised he managed to. I mean, because of the safety car and the restart, that he was actually able to still thwart that 5-second penalty. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Had some impressive pace there. So I think the Alpine actually exceeded my expectations in this race. I wasn't expecting much at all from what we've seen in testing. Maybe this is the one team that maybe broke out of the testing predictions mode, I think, and did a little bit better. Not a lot better, but a little bit better than expected. So maybe they've got a little something in hand, hopefully.
Well, if I'm honest, they kind of are in the where I thought Aston Martin would be. So maybe you're right. Maybe they did best their expectation. Well, Fernando said he was struggling with high tire degradation, as was Mercedes. And while it was not a great race for him, he did say it was easier to follow other cars now. So despite my pondering and questioning about whether the regulation worked or not, Fernando would certainly know far better than I do, and far better than most of the other drivers on the grid. So, he said it definitely was improving. I feel like Alpine are going to have to find some pace, though. And we're going to have to find it quick, because I can't imagine, Paul, that Renault is going to be happy trundling around in the midfield for too much longer.
Behind the Haas.
Behind the Haas.
Right.
I cannot imagine that is going to... But never fear, because Otmar is here.
He'll figure it all out.
He'll figure it out. He just doesn't want Lawrence showing up every day at work.
No, it's supposed to be nice. I must say the pink cars throws me off.
Yeah, me too.
I can't see those as an Alpine right now. I like the Alpine colors. I mean, I got no problem with the pink car, but it seemed better suited with the Force Indias, etc.
It did. To get back to French Racing Blue.
Yeah, it's a factory team.
Yes.
I feel like they should give everything up for their sponsors, but they
yeah. All right, AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, DNF, Yuki Tsunoda, and P8. Pierre had a good race going in the top 10, but his race unraveled with an MGUH issue, another Red Bull engine, in a fiery mess, which brought out the safety car. I'm not quite sure. This is the one thing, and I don't know. I'm just saying. Don't write this on a rock. I'm just saying that if the marshals were slow in removing that car because of the battery, F1 needs to look at that, because it took quite a while to get that car out of the way.
They sure do.
That whole battery, well, you can't touch it, you're going to wait for the green light. Damn hybrids. Please. Because they just sat out there driving around and around and around, waiting for somebody just to push the car 20 feet,
Yep.
That's wrong.
It is
Sorry.
wrong. It's bad. They need
Yeah.
to fix that for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what switches it from green to red or
I
vice
don't know.
versa. I'm guessing you have to press something when you're in the car, but obviously he was in a hurry to get out, perhaps. But they definitely need something, either something remote or something to thwart that process, because everyone just standing around twiddling their thumbs waiting for a light to change is not the way you want to be performing it during the F1 weekend.
No.
Right?
No, they got to figure that out. Yuki had a better race, driving very calm, even managed to hold off Bottas for quite a while, which is a recurring theme between those two. Eventually was overtaken, settled for 8th, but he said, it was a good race for him. He gained a couple of positions, obviously, but he had some good battles, and it was a good race. Back in the points where he started.
Yep, the only guy to get a Honda/Red Bull power unit to the finish line.
To the finish line,
good for him. Yeah,
go Yuki.
He had a lot to work on, and one race at a time, Yuki. So good on you.
Yep. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll in P12, Nico Hulkenberg. Did I say Lance Stroll? I did.
I want it now! What's the matter with those twats down there?
P12, Nico Hulkenberg parachuted at the last moment in for the suffering, the struggling Sebastian Vettel, of all things. I can't. That
was a real bummer.
It is a real bummer, Seb. So he has COVID. He came down with COVID. Out. Nico Hulkenberg. How tough is that? I can't remember. Has it been a couple years before he subbed? Or did he sub last year?
I think he did it last year.
Maybe he did, but anyway, tough ask. This isn't the start of the season that the team wanted, with Stroll not able to get into the points, even with 3 DNFs ahead of him, right?
Yeah.
That just that's not good. Both drivers are being told to lift and coast several times during the race to minimize issues. Hulkenberg, who was parachuted into that car at the last minute, drove a good race in my opinion, but he was struggling with heat, with the team telling him at one point during the race that the car was too hot to box, that he'd have to drive around and cool it off a little before they could, because I'm assuming when it got in there and stopped, the brakes or something would have just burst into flames.
Yeah, something heat soak can just be. We know they're always on the limit on those seconds. And when they do the hold for 5 seconds or whatever, that does a lot of damage, quite honestly. When they do that, because they can't put all their little fans on them and all that stuff.
Right. So in the end, Paul, this will not make Lawrence happy. And even though this is I guess, look, maybe this is the car that Otmar oversaw the development of, and you're having to live with it, Lawrence. But don't feel too bad, because Otmar's living with the car that Martin oversaw the development of, and he's having to live with that at Alpine.
Right.
But, this is maybe a tough lesson, what I call the Hassian syndrome, where Lawrence is learning you can throw a hell of a lot of money at it, but it doesn't guarantee success.
Sure doesn't. The cars didn't look good driving wise anyway. But when you're dealing with the heating issues, etc., and obviously that's just a part of packaging with the Mercedes engine, and where the airflow's going. We obviously will talk about McLaren there, but I mean that's what this new era is going to do. It's going to throw a few wrenches in the works, and they've got to work on their packaging to get to, because there's no way you can go through a season lifting and coasting just because your car's overheating the whole time. It's only one race, out of, I don't know, what do we have, 54 races this year? Something like that. So
it's like a NASCAR season.
So all you can do as a team is to try and use all that data and get on it. Unfortunately, for all these teams that maybe didn't quite get it right, you've only got a week to figure it out, or 4 days, so to speak.
Right.
Pushing those cars in the garage at the next track, so they really don't have a lot of time to do a lot of changes. So let's hope that maybe some of the gremlins that have attacked some of these cars with the new design, it was a more track specific issue rather than just a car and rule package problem.
Because I'm sure Lawrence has felt like we're gonna really come out with a good car in 22. We've got that Mercedes power, right? And there, you would, if you're Lawrence, you had every reason to expect that you would, hit the ground in pretty good shape. But the next 6 cars that we're going to talk about are all Mercedes. So you had 2 Aston Martins. Let's get to Williams. Alex Albon in P13, Nicholas Latifi P16. I said last week that I suspected Albon would rise to the top of that driver duel. That didn't take long. Drove a good race, brought it home in P13, which would have been P16, I guess, without the DNFs, but still, to bring it home in P13, I thought it was a good race for Alex. Nonetheless, he said they felt okay. He said that it was a decent race. He said they got a lot of things to work on. They felt like they got some good information out of that car to work on, but he had his chin up.
Yep. Yeah, I like the color.
I do too.
Looking car, yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's a
really
good
like
looking
that
car.
blue. So that's the good thing we can say about the Williams. But
That's right.
yeah, just as we talked about, it's early days.
It is.
Some teams are going to have a lot harder work than others, and they've got a lot of time to get. Well, they don't have a lot of time, but they have at least a team like Williams, who aren't fighting out for the World Championship, Constructors Championship, can, need to be patient, work on their stuff, make sure they get their sums right. So when they do make the adjustments, they're correct, rather than just start chasing around and panic.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's very easy to just run around the room and start screaming with your hands in the air. But
Right.
take a methodical approach and steadily, work your way up in performance.
Right. Yeah, and Nicholas, same thing. You just kind of struggling to get on top of that car, finished it out in P16. Still, just kind of a same situation for him as well. Here's a team I'm sure they didn't think they'd be towards the back, is McLaren. Wow. What a difference a year. Brutal. Lando Norris, P15, Dan Ricciardo in P14. The team started on the medium compounds, and they're the only team to do that, but it didn't help as they floundered towards the back of the grid. Dan can say that at least he beat Lando, but that's cold comfort given how far off the pace the cars were. Andreas said, really, it's just merely a continuation of all the issues they were having in testing. And the free practice, and it was just a continuation of that. And he said it's not an issue they're going to be able to solve quickly. That's difficult. Lando said that they're way off the pace. They have a lot of work to do. They're hoping to bring some new parts, but unless there was something about this track, maybe, like you said, it's early days. Maybe there's something about this particular track that kind of kneecapped their car. I'm not sure. But I don't think there's a light switch for McLaren, Paul, and that's what worries me. I don't think they're just going to instantly bounce back, fighting for Ferrari for third and fourth in that championship, and that's got to be concerning Zach at this point.
Got to be. I mean, we know Barcelona wasn't that bad. They looked fairly good. So some of their troubles will be solved by moving to a different track. I'm not sure if Saudi Arabia is that track to do that, quite honestly. But because it is so bad, there's no way it's track specific only. They may get better at some other tracks, but they really do have to solve 100% what these issues are. It sounded like before, during the testing, that they thought they had a fix for it and it was coming on the plane tomorrow, kind of thing. But it's obviously a bit deeper set than they're expecting, or maybe they're just measuring their PR out to the people. But
it's
definitely
difficult because you think about it, like in testing, Paul, they had those brake overheating issues, right? So the brakes would overheat. They couldn't do any long runs. While they ran and didn't run that long, they thought maybe they figured this out about the chassis or that. They want to try that. That's great. They could have brought a new piece, but they couldn't run long because the brakes would overheat. And so they couldn't really, it's just knock-on effect.
So their development is back. Even if they do solve the problem, they're still a few steps back in development over everybody else because of the lack of running, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. That's just the tough part about all of this for them. But it could be worse. You could have a dual DNF, which is what Red Bull had. Sergio Perez DNF, Max DNF. Max was pushing hard for most of the race, pressing Leclerc. Nearly had him with that undercut at the first stop. Got a little animated on the second one when he was having to manage his outlaps. Felt like the team telling him to take it easy on those tires is costing the opportunity to get around. I think that was marginal at best. The team kind of corroborated that, but I think that's just plain damage control because Max was a little pissed. After the last stop, Max started struggling behind the safety car. When the race started, he was fighting hard with no power steering, which apparently happened when they dropped the car down after that stop.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. They then retired the car with lost power with a fuel pump issue. And this does bring up the issue about fuel pumps. Those fuel pumps, some of the fuel pumps are supplied by to all the teams by a single Magneti Marelli provided to all the teams. So it's sort of a spec part that's provided, one of the pumps anyway, by all for all the teams. So this brings up this question: was it that part that failed? And I think there was some comments that Matt said at this level this should never happen. And I think a lot of people were saying that Max was leveling off of his team, saying at Red Bull at this level shouldn't happen. My hunch is, I don't know, my hunch is that's not what he was saying. He was thinking if it was this spec part, that shouldn't be happening at this level. Right. And as I tweeted today, if Red Bull come out this week and say, let's, like Monty Python, let's not bicker and argue about who killed who. If that happens, then you know it was more likely the Red Bull portion of that fuel pump system.
Yeah.
But if it was the spec part, you'll probably hear about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, they're obviously going to throw that barb out. I guess there was some kind of informational thing sent out to the teams to be wary of this part. I don't know. I'm just reading that.
Yeah, they said they could change it.
But... Yeah, it's not just a part. It's where it's packaged, right? We know.
Yeah.
You put it, if you get it in a place where it's going to overheat, then maybe that's something that Red Bull are responsible for. Is it the parts? Usually these spec parts we deal with IMSA, they have predetermined temperature specs, and if you go out of those specs, then that's your own fault. You need to repackage however you're putting these loggers. Yeah, in IMSA it's loggers for this and that, and ours were going out of getting too high a temperature, so we had to do other things to keep them down. So same thing with all these other spec parts in the engine, etc. You can put them wherever you want. You just got to put them in the right place where it's going to give you the reliability. So they may have to change that once they take a look at it, because it's not just it's pretty much the Red Bull team, right?
Yeah,
and all the other teams didn't really have that failure. Obviously, we know the AlphaTauri had something else go wrong with the engine, with the MGUH. So that seems to be something separate from there. So they're definitely going to have to look at that, figure out how to make that part work. If the part is a super sensitive part, then we'll see that rear its ugly head with some other teams too before they change it. But if it's probably, I'd say, something to do with it's a part that's a little fragile, and maybe it was put in a place that it can't exist on that chassis.
Yeah, they're gonna have to do some digging this week for sure to figure that out. Got to get that sorted out.
It's interesting about the steering also, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, you drop the car down and it bent something in the steering. That's, we know Newey likes to run things as light as they can, and maybe that was just one part that was just a little too light, so they may have to beef up their little steering rack there just a wee bit, because that definitely not something you should be struggling with after just a quick pit stop. I was trying to the pit stop. I was looking from far away. I didn't really see it close up, so I was trying to see if there was anything glaring that was different. It just seemed it just dropped. And
maybe it was a hydraulic issue. That it prompted. I don't know. Perez had a tough race, fought back to fourth, looked set for a podium when Max retired, but then on the first corner of the last lap, engine pretty much froze up and it was game over. Huge impact coming out of there with no points. That hurts a lot. And, you'd say, okay, well, if you're Mercedes, you got to be happy, but I'm not so sure. Maybe it's not Mercedes they need to be worried about. It could be Ferrari, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, watch this space, but we'll see if they get on top of it. All right, let's give away some awards, Paul, as we always do. The
Okay,
first one we
let's
do
that.
is Move of the Race. All right, Paul, Move of the Race. Who'd you give it to?
I'll let you go first because you kind of picked. I'm just
Okay.
tagging on to you. There were some
right.
good passes there for sure.
There was.
Some outside passes.
Yeah, there was. I had the Leclerc Verstappen battle. I just thought that was terrific.
Yep.
Leclerc, breaking early, letting Max hitting that DRS line, getting back. I just thought it was great. And he did it 3 times on the trot, It was great.
Yeah. It was a fun battle, fun cat and mouse game, and Leclerc came out. I think Leclerc had the better car, just a smidge, and Max did everything he could, but it was still fun.
I do too.
Fun to watch the battle.
Yeah, I think Charles had the better car.
Yeah.
And faster car. And I think Max was just sheer throwing it
determination,
in hard, man.
Yeah.
That was Max,
Yeah.
Yep, that's what I had too. All right, let's go to Donkey the Race. All right, Paul, Donkey the Race, who'd you get?
I'm giving it to McLaren.
Ooh.
There's one thing about little reliability issues. It's a lot harder to make a car faster than it is to make it more reliable. So they are in the depths right now, I'm sure, 24/7 trying to fix that problem. But from where they were last year to where they are now, it's a big, big drop, and they've got a struggle on their hands.
Yeah, they do. I gave it to Red Bull.
What does it all mean, Van?
Fuel pump, hydraulics, no power steering, engine locking. I don't know what's going on. What's happening to the Red Bull? I don't understand. So
dogs and cats living together.
I know. It's just, it's just, it's crazy. So that's who I give it to. All right, let's give it Drive of the Race. Good God. All right, Paul. Drive of the Race.
I'm going to give it to my paddock buddy, Magnussen.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You and K-Mags like this.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, just impressive drive, man.
It was a great drive.
Especially from where that team was. It's just very, very fun to watch.
A real shot in the arm. I'm giving it to Charles Leclerc. It is a great race. Fantastic. Yes, I know I'm a Ferrari fan. Everybody knows I'm a Ferrari fan. I'm very happy. But I truly, I thought it was a great race for him. A great drive.
I mean, you compare him to Sainz, who's a heck of a driver.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite pull it off. Charles did get the job done for sure.
Yeah, you had Max, shooting at you 3 times, and he heads up, read it right. It was a great drive by him.
Yep.
So anyway. All right, let's do some mailbag.
Got mail.
First question, Mr. Drury asks, with ground effects back in effect, if these cars dip a wheel into the grass or gravel, will it break the effect and take them straight to the scene of the crash? What do you think, Paul?
No, not if you drop a wheel. No. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it affects anything any differently than before, really. I mean, if you're off, a wheel off, you've still got enough grip, and as long as the wheel's straight, you're fine. If you start putting wheel in it, then things won't be fine very quickly. Just because of lack of adhesion, right? But I don't. There's not going to be a big difference in that. I
think most of the reason I assume, Paul, is that they're kind of staying off the curves because every one of those cars has trick underfloor. You get on those curbs, you're going to chew that underfloor up real quick, and there goes all your downforce.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, and obviously every curb you hit, because the underfloor is more important. Every time you are affecting the balance. Every time you don't keep that car perfectly flat. So it's about sometimes you hit the curbs because you want a straight line, the corner to give you more speed, but the more grip is what they need to give you the more speed versus the straighter line through the corner right now because of how big a percentage the under tray is giving you that grip and therefore corner speed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great question. Andrew Douglas asks, how is energy recovery deployment managed? Does the car handle it autonomously, or does the driver press buttons to recharge and discharge on demand?
It's a bit of both.
Yeah.
There's certain maps they can run for all the deployment and harvesting, etc. that they can use, but I think they also have a couple of buttons there that they can use manually for their attacks or defense.
Or harvest.
Yeah, harvest or defense or attacks on other people. They can save it up in certain areas, and we saw a lot of that. Actually, if you look at the Leclerc and Max battle, when he got that run down those straights that time, he was absolutely saving every single ounce of energy he could, because he was coming from pretty far back. So he was basically just unleashing it. And you saw when he made the move and then Leclerc got back by him, he kind of lost the plot a little bit because he didn't have any more battery left, but also he was still having to harvest it because he wanted to harvest as much energy as he could to really use it in the one place he thought was he would actually be able to make a pass. And so, yeah, there's a lot of that going on, but yeah, definitely there's a final override button for that deployment for the driver when he chooses to use it, rather than just when the team has kind of made a map which ultimately gets the most out of the harvesting of energy and the lap time, right? Which is different than racing.
Yeah. Great question, Andrew. Christian Carroll has a nice question too. He's saying over the weekend he listened to several commentators discussing how teams would not overbuild part supplies to not hit their spending cap this season. My question is this: does the FIA assign a blanket cost on parts build by each team? Say if Haas makes 4 extra front wings, do they have to claim that as a $400,000 against the spending limit, even if the real cost is nowhere near that? For example, if the wings commonly believed to be cost between 85 and 115K each, but if my team has, say, 10 employees that work in a carbon department, and their salary and their cost is fixed, as well as the autoclave to make the parts. So wouldn't the more front wings I make lower the cost per unit? I understand that the utilities to run the machines, like autoclaves and stuff like that, and raw carbon fiber will increase. But I bet that these teams have containers full of raw carbon to mold. But wouldn't it be the more parts they produce cost less per unit rather than more effectively?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have no idea. I mean, and that's why we were like always questioning how effective this cap can actually be. I mean, there's so many places to squirrel away money. It's like, you got NHL hockey or football or whatever have salary caps. That's pretty easy to monitor.
Yeah.
Then they're not monitoring how much they're selling the chocolate bars at the deal and how much profit they're making. Here we're literally making parts, and each part needs to be a price associated with it, and then that price associated is added to the cost cap. And I have no idea how they're going to do that.
Right.
And,
or are they just looking at the overall P&L and they're seeing the balance of cash in, cash out, expense costs associated? It's difficult to I don't know, Christian. It's a great question.
It is a great question. Great analysis of how it can be hidden and what how many different levels of questions and parts and pieces that go into building these things that they have to account for.
Right. Because you're right. It's to scale. You could benefit from high manufacturing scale, costs to scale because you're buying more. I mean, to his part, you're trying to encourage teams to try more aero development, not less. Right. And I think it's a brilliant question, Christian. So I wish I had a definitive answer because I don't know how they're doing that. I haven't seen like the official guidelines around the cost cap from the FIA.
I would want to look at them.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to. I'd probably rather just Martin Brundle and Crofty explain it to me, but yeah, some a bit, brother. But I do think it's a great question because therein lies the issues. The FIA made some pretty bold statements when they instituted the cost cap that any infringement would be met with extreme penalty, right? I.e. perhaps even exclusion from the Constructors' Championship and prize money. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm very intrigued on how they do it, but you bring up a good point. Do they ascribe costs for parts, and then that way they can track development of those parts and assimilate or aggregate the total cost of running a team? I think it's a great point. I wish I had a much more intelligent answer for you. I don't. But a
You
brilliant.
know the teams are spending a lot of money on some very good accountants trying to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah.
Matt asks, "Hi guys, looking for the race review." Well, thank you, Matt. I think I enjoyed watching it. The new rules have not entirely won me over yet. My question is, how good is Charles Leclerc? I personally am of the opinion that given the machinery, he is in the very top bracket and at least equal to Hamilton, Verstappen. I remember watching a race specifically in GP2 where he was so far ahead and did an extra pit stop and overtook everyone again, seemingly for fun. I think the only question mark is whether he can handle the pressure of a championship title. Do you see the coming decades as him being the main challenger to Max? And if not, who would you rate above him in the current grid? Great question, Matt. Paul, tough question.
First?
Talk us through it.
I mean, it's still early days on all these young guys, right? You got the Landos, the Georges, the Charleses, the Carloses. I mean, they're all really good drivers, and we won't really know how they handle the pressure till they get put in that pressure point. It's one thing being under pressure to win a race. It's another thing to be under pressure and do the right things to win a championship. Very different. He's more than capable of winning a world championship. But you know, so are the other guys, and it's going to be opportunity, right? It's opportunity, and who makes the most. I mean, Max got there, but you know, so many haven't because basically Lewis has been dominating for so many years. So, but there's like 5 or 6 people who one of them's going to pull, you know, shine above the others. But I think we're just in for an era, you know, as long as the cars are close enough that there's not going to be this dominance by a driver and team for the next few years. And I think that all these guys are going to have the opportunity to win races and have a shot at the championship in, you know, the near future, if not the current future, right?
I feel like, it's a great point. And I absolutely rate Charles Leclerc. There's no doubt about it. And of that class where you had Max, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Pierre, all those guys, of that particular class of group people that came in, Max was the first one to come in, right? So he had a little more experience under his belt because he came in so young, right? Mm-hmm. But remember that when he was, you know, when Max came in, he did some pretty goofy stuff the first 2 or 3 years, right? I mean,
they made up a lot of rules.
Yeah, right.
Max braking, moving into the braking area rule. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, he was cutting his teeth and making some silly mistakes, and so was Charles. Mm-hmm. You know, remember when he ran off, was it at Monza? And, you know, there's just, you know, they all do. Lewis did, you know, China in 07, you know, whatever. They all do. That happens. But I think absolutely Charles is there. Carlos is there. I think Pierre Gasly is thereabouts.
Yeah.
There are some drivers, and Max is absolutely there and had 2 or 3 years before his class got to F1. Mm-hmm. So I think Max is the benchmark on that front, but these guys are right there. And in answer to your query, I think this is the future battle between all of these guys.
Yeah.
I am going to get slayed for saying this, but the Max-Lewis battle isn't really, in my mind, the real battle to watch. I think it is going to be the Max Charles, Max Carlos, Max Pierre. His other classmates, I think, are going to be the real future battles of Formula One for several years here.
Right.
Now, I'm not slighting Lewis in the least, because you could go back to Schumacher and say, oh, the Schumacher-Fernando battle. It wasn't really the Schumacher. It was Schumacher-Mika Hakkinen was the real battle. It wasn't really Schumacher-Fernando. Fernando was much younger, of a different graduating class. He was coming in with all the young guns like Lewis and all that. It was really that Fernando-Lewis battle that we didn't get to see, right? Which would have
except for the 1 year.
The 1 year where they were, McLaren. But you know, Lewis fighting against his own classmate, the Nico Rosberg, right? That was a direct head-to-head. So, yeah, I think absolutely, man. I think Charles is everything he's measured up to be. I think Carlos is too. I think we're in good hands with some incredibly good talent on that grid, apart from Lewis and Fernando and Daniel Ricciardo and those guys, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So there you go. All right. Well, that's what we think about the Bahrain Grand Prix. Let us know what you think about it. You can do so by going to the Parc Fermé and sharing your opinion. As always, folks, just do it with decorum and civility, as always. And thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we would not and could not, quite honestly, do this podcast if it wasn't for you. So if you are not a Patreon supporter, what better time than the start of the season to jump in and be a Patreon supporter or TPF for 2022 season by going to our Patreon account. You can find a link on the main website, the Parc Fermé.
And then you can join in there the F1 fantasy game if you're a Patreon.
That's right, because I need all the help. I am in dead last.
Are you really?
Dead last. And everybody's
so
like, you idiot.
Yeah.
You didn't even pick your own team, Ferrari. No, I didn't. It was terrible.
I definitely did that, but yeah.
Terrible.
Max winning would have been better.
Yeah.
I did get second and third place, so that was
it's so bad. I'm already, you know what? I'm like McLaren at this point. I'm already starting the season off at the very back. It's just not good. Not good. So anyway, all right. Well, until we come back next week, Paul, to talk about the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix in Jeddah.
Yes.
Should be interesting.
Seems like only a couple of weeks ago we were there.
I know. Seems like just, a month or so. I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Until next week when we come back to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camper, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.